Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tearing open one of the most powerful political allegories ever written, a book often disguised on high school reading lists as, a simple tale about farm animals. George Orwell's Animal Farm.
It's such a misleading title, isn't it? The original subtitle was Animal Farm, a fairy story.
A fairy story.
Yeah, and that gentle, almost childish framing stands in this stark, brutal contrast to the political machine. It just completely dissects. It's a scathing, satirical critique of totalitarianism.
And what's so fascinating is that Orwell wasn't coy about his intentions at all. This wasn't some abstract commentary. This was a surgical strike.
Absolutely. He made it crystal clear. He said that every serious line he'd written since 1936 was, in some way, against totalitarianism. And with Animal Farm, his goal was to consciously fuse political purpose and artistic purpose into one whole.
And he is coming from a very specific political place himself.
Right. As a democratic socialist, he felt he had to expose what he called the Soviet myth. He argued that destroying that romanticized image of Stalin's Russia was absolutely essential for the revival of a genuine socialist movement.
So what we have is this highly precise, structurally complex critique of Stalin's Soviet Union, but it's all wrapped in this deceptively simple fable.
Exactly.
Our mission today is to pull apart the history behind the book. From the shocking story of how it almost never saw the light of day, to the precise historical figures those animals represent, and ultimately how Orwell used his literary genius to craft this timeless warning about power and language.
And you really can't appreciate the book without understanding the political minefield Orwell had to cross just to get it published. The story of its rejection speaks volumes.
Well, let's start right there, because the timeline it's just baffling. Orwell finished this masterpiece in 1943, but it wasn't published until August 1945.
2 full years.
2 years of shopping around, getting no thank you from major publishers. What was the holdup?
It was entirely dictated by the political reality of World War II. Britain and the United States were allied with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany.
Uncle Joe Stalin.
Uncle Joe,
Yeah.
Exactly. And publicly criticizing him was seen as, almost treasonous, or at the very least, severely damaging to the war effort. Publishers just didn't want to risk offending a crucial wartime ally.
And these weren't just standard form letters, were they? The rejections came from the absolute highest echelons of the literary world. T.S. Eliot turned it down.
Yeah, T.S. Eliot, who was a director at Faber and Faber, and he actually wrote back acknowledging the book's brilliance. He praised its good writing and fundamental integrity.
Wow.
But his reason for rejection was purely political. He felt that criticism came from the point of view of pure communism, and so he thought it wasn't convincing. He essentially labeled it as Trotskyite propaganda.
But the truly damning rejection, the one that really makes you realize how high the stakes were, that came from Jonathan Cape.
That's where it gets into, actual infiltration. Jonathan Cape initially accepted the manuscript, but then suddenly, mysteriously reversed course. And that decision was made after he consulted with a senior official in the Ministry of Information.
And this official was?
Later unmasked as a man named Peter Smollett, who history now shows was an active NKVD Soviet agent, codenamed ABO.
Wait, so an actual Soviet spy was directly working to suppress a work of literature in Britain that criticized the Soviet regime.
That's it. It wasn't just cautious publishing, it was political sabotage.
Unbelievable.
It is. But Orwell argued that direct sabotage was, only part of the problem. He detailed his greater frustration in this amazing unpublished preface he wrote called The Freedom of the Press.
Right.
He claimed that the sinister fact about censorship in England was that it was largely voluntary.
Voluntary censorship. What do you mean by that?
He was talking about this general tacit agreement among the British intellectual class editors, publishers, academics, to just not criticize the USSR. Orwell saw it as pure intellectual cowardice. He believed this voluntary suppression of inconvenient facts was the worst enemy a writer or journalist has to face in a democracy.
So it was just fashionable not to question Stalin.
It was the prevailing orthodoxy, yes.
It paints this picture of intense isolation for him during those years. And yet, once the book finally found a publisher and came out in August 1945, right as the war was ending, it was an instant phenomenon.
It was huge. The first print run sold out almost immediately. And that controversy, all the trouble getting it published, that actually galvanized public interest. Critics were immediately forced to grapple with its political intent.
Which is exactly what we need to do now. Let's shift gears and dive into that allegorical mapping. The genius of Animal Farm is that virtually every character, every event, is a direct reflection of the Russian Revolution and the Stalinist era.
It is a perfect schematic. Let's start with the foundation. Old Major. He's the original inspirational figure.
The old prize boar, whose passionate speech about beasts of England sparks the whole thing.
He represents a composite of Karl Marx, who provided the philosophical foundation, and Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the early Soviet state.
And there's a really specific detail that ties him to Lenin, isn't there?
There is, yeah. The public display of Old Major's skull after his death. It's a direct parallel to the permanent display of Lenin's embalmed body in his mausoleum in Red Square. It's about turning the ideological father into a literal icon.
So once the figurehead is gone, the power struggle begins. And it's between the two boars who inherit the ideology, Napoleon and Snowball.
This is the definitive political rivalry of the era. Joseph Stalin versus Leon Trotsky. Napoleon is the ruthless, cunning force. That's Stalin. He's not interested in debate. He prefers quiet organization and brute force.
And Snowball is Trotsky, the more idealistic, eloquent strategist.
Exactly, and their conflict isn't just about personalities, it's about the future of the state.
Right, the windmill.
The windmill. Snowball's great project, which symbolizes Trotsky's real-world focus on rapid industrialization and modernization. Napoleon, like Stalin, first dismisses it, but then co-opts it once Snowball is exiled, making it his own achievement.
But here's a point of nuance that Orwell built in. While we see Snowball as the sympathetic underdog, the seeds of corruption were sown even with him.
That's such a critical insight. Orwell suggested that the first note of corruption was struck when Snowball agreed to the pigs secretly stealing the cow's milk for themselves. It shows the failure isn't just one bad leader. It's about how quickly an intellectual elite can rationalize its own privilege, even at the very start.
And the mechanism for Napoleon securing total power. The dogs.
His 9 massive, aggressive dogs. They are the secret police, the NKVD, later the KGB, who enforce his dictatorship through pure terror. When Napoleon drives Snowball off the farm, that's Stalin expelling Trotsky from the Soviet Union.
Now let's talk about the massive underbelly of the Soviet state, the loyal, working populace. And this is embodied so tragically by the cart horse, Boxer.
Boxer is maybe the most sympathetic character. He represents the dedicated, honest, but just tragically naive Russian working class. His relentless work is often compared to Alexei Stakhanov, that famous miner who became the face of a Soviet labor movement.
So Boxer's mantra, "I will work harder," that reflects the socialist pressure for heroic overachievement.
Precisely. And his loyalty is absolute, his intellect is limited, and his blind trust in the leadership, even when things look terrible, makes him the perfect victim of this revolution.
And the final piece of that leadership puzzle, the true master manipulator of reality, is Squealer.
Squealer is the minister of propaganda personified. He represents the state media and the Soviet bureaucracy, specifically organs like the state newspaper Pravda, whose name, ironically, means the truth.
Of course.
His entire job is to justify every single policy shift, every lie, every injustice.
We can trace the historical event so clearly, too. The revolt against Mr. Jones, who is Tsar Nicholas II, that's the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917.
The Battle of the Cowshed that follows, where they fight off the human farmers, that mirrors the Russian Civil War and the Allied intervention. And later, when the windmill is first destroyed, Napoleon immediately blames Snowball.
That's scapegoating. It's classic Stalinist historical revisionism, isn't it? Just rewrite the past to distract from your own failures.
Exactly. But the darkest echo of history is in Chapter 7, when the dogs drag out animals who confess to collaborating with Snowball and are then executed on the spot.
That's the Moscow show trials.
A direct, chilling allusion to the Moscow show trials and the Great Terror of 36 to 38, where Stalin purged his perceived enemies, often by forcing false public confessions.
The geopolitics are also perfectly mapped out with Napoleon's fluctuating alliances with the neighboring human farms.
Yes, Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood, the careless, easygoing one, he represents the Western Allies, Britain, and the U.S.
But the more immediate and terrifying threat is Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield.
Frederick, the tough, cruel farmer, is clearly Adolf Hitler, and the sequence of events is just unambiguous. Napoleon makes a surprise deal with Frederick, only for Frederick to immediately betray him by paying for timber with forged banknotes and then launching a vicious attack.
The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and Operation Barbarossa.
In a nutshell, the Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, followed by Hitler's surprise invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. It's all there.
It's just astonishing how complete that mapping is. And this brings us to the core mechanism of the book, the failure of ideals and the role language plays in that failure.
Well, the central theme is that core irony. The revolution, which began with the highest ideals of freedom and equality, ends up recreating a tyranny that is arguably worse, more cunning than the one they overthrew.
And Squealer is the chief engineer of this moral collapse, using rhetoric and logical fallacies to manipulate reality itself. It's not just lying, it's making the animals believe their own memories are wrong.
It's constant psychological warfare. When the pigs reserve the milk and apples for themselves, Squealer doesn't just say, "we deserve it." He uses a false dichotomy. He says the pigs, as brain workers, need these nutrients, and if they fail, Mr. Jones will come back.
So the choice is either our privilege or total collapse. No third option.
None. It's an appeal to fear packaged as an appeal to authority. And this is why the systematic manipulation of the Seven Commandments, the foundational law of the farm, is so vital.
Right, they're written on the barn wall, but they keep changing.
They're constantly altered, forcing the animals to doubt their own literacy, their own recollections.
Walk us through the most famous corruption.
Well, the rule, "no animal shall sleep in a bed," is changed to "no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets" after the pigs move into the farmhouse.
The justification being
That a pile of straw is a bed, so a bed just means a place to sleep. It's the sheets that are the human invention. Then, "no animal shall kill any other animal" becomes "no animal shall kill any other animal without cause," which conveniently justifies the purges.
And that physical alteration of the written law is the final blow. If you can change the law, you can change memory itself.
And it only works because of the tragic ignorance and apathy of the other animals. I mean, the sheep are conditioned to just bleat simple slogans, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, to drown out any real debate.
And the cynicism of Benjamin, the elderly donkey. He's one of the few who can read, yet he refuses to intervene.
Benjamin represents the intellectual who sees the truth but believes nothing ever changes. He just resigns himself to the idea that life will go on as it has always gone on, that is badly. His silence is complicity.
Boxer's ultimate betrayal is maybe the most profound moment of tragic irony in the whole book. After all his sacrifice, what's his reward?
He works himself past exhaustion, collapsing while hauling stones. He fully trusts that Napoleon will ensure he gets a restful retirement. Instead, Napoleon sells him to the knacker, the glue factory.
For a small sum of money, and the ultimate cold-blooded insult.
The money is used to buy a crate of whiskey for the pigs. It's the ultimate exploitation of the working class once their utility is gone. Squealer, of course, gives this moving speech, claiming Boxer died peacefully in a hospital, cementing the lie.
And the book culminates in that famous, devastating final scene.
The situational irony is complete. The pigs are walking on 2 legs, wearing clothes, drinking with the human farmers. The 7 commandments are gone, replaced by a single paradoxical phrase. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
And the other animals are watching them through the window.
Watching the pigs and the men arguing over a card game, and they're unable to distinguish between the faces of the men and the faces of the pigs.
The revolution has failed. It didn't bring freedom, it just changed who held the whip.
Orwell achieved exactly what he set out to do. He didn't just write a history, he wrote a universal blueprint for how power corrupts. It's why the book is still censored today, removed from curricula, blocked online in places like China and the UAE, because that warning remains deeply, deeply relevant.
That enduring lesson, as Orwell stressed, is that oppression relies on the ignorance, the apathy, and the short memory of the populace. Freedom requires constant critical awareness.
And if we look back to the beginning of our depth dive, we talked about Orwell's intense frustration with what he called intellectual cowardice, that voluntary suppression of inconvenient facts in democratic countries. He saw that as the great threat.
So, if Animal Farm is a call for intellectual honesty, you have to ask yourself right now, in our contemporary media landscape, what are the dominant orthodoxies that are so powerful that criticizing them feels next door to unprintable? What inconvenient facts are being voluntarily suppressed by writers and journalists today, mirroring the very self-censorship that kept Animal Farm off the shelves in 1943? That question is the true continuing relevance of the book.